You feel it every time you hear the call to work for the common good. The words seem right, the goals seem noble, but a heavy feeling lingers in my heart. You're sitting late at night working on a report, feeling your life slip away, and you catch yourself thinking that this sacrifice doesn't feel voluntary at all. That vague feeling that you're being used keeps nagging at you, but you push it aside, afraid of coming across as selfish or as the kind of person who doesn't share the company's values. You've come to believe that your fatigue is the price of success, and your loyalty is an investment in the future. But what if this investment isn't in you, but in someone else's empire? What if your loyalty isn't a virtue, but the most valuable resource that's ever been taken from you? It's not about how good your employer is, and it's not that working as part of a team is a bad thing. The problem lies in the very architecture of this ideology. We've grown accustomed to thinking that team spirit is a way to unite equals in pursuit of success. But in reality, it's a technique for managing loyalty that turns your personal time into fuel for someone else's ambitions. When you're called upon to sacrifice your personal interests for the common good, a subtle shift in meaning takes place. Your private interests are dismissed as secondary, while the common good is treated as sacred. But here's the thing, in this system, the common good almost always has a specific owner, whose interests, remarkably, coincide with what the corporation demands of you. The first component of the system is the sacralization of the work process through lofty ideals. They don't tell you, do this for a paycheck. They tell you, we're changing the world, we're building the future, we're a team of like-minded people. When everyday tasks are wrapped up in a messianic narrative, you stop seeing them as ordinary work. You feel like you're part of something bigger, and it's that feeling that makes you work overtime. This isn't a job, it's a calling. And in a calling, it's not customary to demand a fair deal. The second issue is the blurring of personal boundaries under the guise of flexibility. You're taught that working after 6 p.m., on weekends, or during vacation isn't a violation of your rights, but a sign of commitment. This isn't coercion, it's culture. You're led to believe that separating work and life is an outdated approach. As a result, your life begins to belong entirely to the company. You can't even articulate where your own interests end and the organization's interests begin. You lose the right to be yourself. The third tactic is exploiting your need for recognition. The system knows that feeling valued is important to you. That's why it doesn't pay you in money. It rewards you with status, acknowledgments at company-wide meetings, and the feeling that you're part of the elite. But this recognition is merely a currency that has no purchasing power outside the office. You're rewarded for giving more than is expected, making you a hostage to your own desire to be the best. Your ambition becomes a tool for your own exploitation. The fourth tactic is creating the illusion of shared responsibility. You're constantly told that we're all in this together, that the company's success is each of our successes. But when a crisis hits, for some reason the boat turns out to have holes only for those who are rowing. You are held responsible for risks you didn't create and for results whose benefits go to others. You are not a partner. You are an exploited asset who has been allowed to feel like an owner. The fifth factor is the fear of exclusion. You're kept within the system through constant reminders of the importance of the group. If you start asking questions about money or personal boundaries, you're viewed as an outsider. Team spirit turns into peer pressure, where any display of self-interest is labeled as toxic. You're afraid of falling behind because the system has convinced you that outside the team, you're nobody. This is isolation through belonging. The sixth mechanism is the substitution of financial justice with emotional compensation. The system will always try to convince you that money isn't what matters most. They'll offer you free lunches, company events, branded hoodies, and a nice office, all so they don't have to pay you what you're actually worth. The emotional crumbs they throw your way are meant to silence your need for security. You think you're loved, when in reality you're just being exploited. The seventh tactic is the systematic draining of your energy. You're forced to give the system the best years of your life, when you could be creating something of your own. The system consumes you entirely, leaving you with nothing but exhaustion, which it then uses against you. The eighth stage is the development of dependence on the system as the only reality. You become part of the architecture, a brick in a building that does not belong to you. The 10th block is the final merging of your identity with the brand. You are not a person, you are a function. Put it all together, you'll see that it's a coherent architecture. Stop confusing teamwork with team service. Anything that goes beyond the scope of the contract must either be paid for or considered a charitable contribution. Stop looking for family, friendship, or recognition within the corporation. You must find meaning in your personal life, not in the workplace. You are the protagonist of your own life, not a resource on someone else's balance sheet. You are free from illusions, and that is the most important resource you have ever had.